أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد. Yesterday after class, a brother asked about making Umrah repetitive. That is, he wants to make Umrah for his father, wants to make Umrah for his grandmother, and he asked, what's the ruling on that? And can a person make Umrah more than one time while they're residing in Mecca, or do they have to go out to the Miqat to perform the second Umrah or the third Umrah? And that conversation was in Arabic. There were a few brothers around and they said, can you repeat that in English? But because of the length of the discussion, I told them that we would start today's class, inshallah ta'ala, with this particular issue, because a lot of people ask about doing repetitive Umrah or doing Umrah from Tan'im or Masjid Aisha, and what is the ruling on that? So, first thing is that a person who wants to make Umrah on someone else's behalf has to fulfill certain conditions. The first is that they have made Umrah for themselves. And if you have not made Umrah for yourself in your lifetime, then you cannot perform Umrah on behalf of someone else. That's number one. Second is that the person on whose behalf you are performing the Umrah has to be ajiz. That means that they themselves do not have the ability to make Umrah. So perhaps it is because they are deceased. They obviously cannot make Umrah. Or they do not have the physical ability. They've reached an age in which it's very difficult for them to travel, for example. The third type is the one who does not have who may have the physical ability, but does not have the financial ability to make Umrah for themselves, nor do they expect to have that ability. So this person can make Umrah on their behalf. How is that done? That's done by, at the Miqat, when the person is first beginning his Umrah. That is, when he's first going into the state of Ihram, he says, Labbaik Allahumma Umrah. That's normal. That's what a person would normally say when they're going to perform Umrah for themselves. They say, Labbaik Allahumma Umratan. All right. So, which means, oh Allah, I'm at your service performing Umrah. If they're performing it on behalf of someone else, then they say, Labbaik Allahumma Umratan and so-and-so, and fulan. So they're going to say, Allah, I'm performing this Umrah, I'm at your service performing this Umrah for such and such a person. Okay. What if the person does not say that? What if they just say, Labbaik Allahumma Umrah, or they don't say anything, but their intention is that they're performing Umrah on behalf of someone else? But they don't say anything. It still counts, even if they don't say anything. Because our Prophet ﷺ said, "Innamal a'malu binniyat." And our actions are based on intentions. And your intention, the time you got to the Miqat, was to go into Ihram and perform Umrah on behalf of this particular individual. You do not have to say anything. That statement is a dhikr. It is a remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is not necessary in the sense that it is wajib or it is a condition for the validity of your ihram. All right? So as long as you have the intention, then the Umrah is for the person for whom you are performing it for. All right? Now, the next question that a lot of people have is about the reward for that Umrah. Do I get the reward for Umrah too? And I'll ask you a question. If you get paid at the end of the month, 5,000 riyals, 10,000 riyals, all right? And you say, at the end of the month, my salary is for my father, for example. And you give it to him. Do you get the 5,000 riyals, or does he get it? He gets it. So if you give the reward of your Umrah to someone else, then it's for them. You don't get the reward also of making Umrah. And that reward, as the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, authentic hadith narrated by Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, that from one Umrah to the next is a kaffara lima baynahuma. It is an expiation for the sins that were committed in between those two umrahs. So if you made one umrah for yourself last year, and then you came back this year to make umrah for your father who's deceased, you don't get the reward that is mentioned in that hadith, because you've given the reward of umrah to your father. Does that mean you don't get any reward? No, it doesn't mean that. You're going to get the reward for what you've spent to make the umrah. You're going to get the reward for the time that you spent in ibadah. You're going to get the reward for all of the dua that you're making when you're on Safa and Marwa and going around the Kaaba. You're going to get the reward for all of those things. That is a reward that is beyond the reward of Umrah itself. All right? So that's an important point to understand. Now, after a person has performed Umrah and they cut their hair, this is where it gets tricky for a lot of people, because now they're asking, well, can I just go to Masjid Aisha, right, which is right outside, because you have the Haram area, not the Haram as the Masjid, but the Haram area, okay? And then right outside of the Haram area is what is known as Al-Hil. So you have this area which is sacred, and then the area right outside which is not considered to be sacred. That is where At-Tan'im is. And that masjid is called Masjid Aisha, radiallahu ta'ala anha, because that is approximately the place where she went after Hajj, when she had not made Umrah, prior to Hajj, because her period was on. The Prophet ﷺ allowed her after the Hajj to go out to that place called At-Tan'im. And from there, because that's the closest place outside of the Haram sanctuary. And so she went there, she made Ihram, she came back in and made Umrah. Our brother Abdurrahman was with her. Okay, so here we have an indication of the permissibility of one who is inside of the Haram area to go outside and then come back in with Ihram and make Umrah. However, this was not a common practice amongst the companions of the Masjid of Allah, alayhi salatu wasalam, radiallahu ta'ala. And because it wasn't their common practice, some of the latter scholars, I want you to understand this point, because you're going to hear this. You're going to hear people say you can't do that, it's bid'ah. Some of the latter scholars have said that it is bid'ah. It's an innovation to go outside of the Haram area to Masjid Tan'im and to come back in as a muhram. And without going into a lot of detail, the reality is that there weren't scholars prior to the 7th century that labeled that practice as innovation. There were some scholars who said that it was makruh, in the sense that it's disliked. But Imam Nabawi, rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned in one of his books, Al-Ijma' ala Mashru'iyyati. He mentioned that there's consensus amongst the scholars that it is sanctioned in Islam, that one can do it. Even that is probably going a step beyond reality in terms of there actually being consensus amongst the scholars. However, it was done, at least during the time of the Tabi'in. Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu mentioned, as it comes from the son of Ibn Abi Shaykh, when he was asked about that, he said, I don't like it myself. He said, but people do it. For me, it is more beloved to make Umrah in Dhul Qa'dah, more beloved to make Umrah in Muharram. He was talking about those people who make Hajj and then they make repetitive Umrahs. So the reality is that this action was done. However, it wasn't commonplace amongst the companions. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, but the reason why, if we look at it, what does Umrah consist of? Tawaf and what? Tawaf and Sa'i. Which one is better, Tawaf or Sa'i? Which one is a better act of ibadah? Tawaf, no doubt about it. Tawaf is the better act of ibadah. All right? And that is why Sa'i is never performed independently. You can't just go, I'm just going to go to Mecca, I'm going to make Sa'i. You can just go to Mecca and make Tawaf. But you can't just make Sa'i. Sa'i can only come after a Tawaf. So Tawaf is the better act of ibadah. And the companions, if they were in Mecca, would make a lot of tawaf, not a lot of umrahs. One umrah and a lot of tawaf. So this is actually better for a person to make one umrah and a lot of tawafs than to make an umrah and to go out and then come back with another umrah and then go out and make another umrah. So if the issue is you're looking for what is better for you to do, then what is best for you to do is to make one umrah and then make a number of tawafs. However, if a person does not have the ability, I mean, they want to make umrah on behalf of their deceased father, for example, and they're from a distant land, this is their only opportunity that they can see within the future, that they're going to have the opportunity to come to Mecca. They don't expect to be able to make it back. Then in that case, and we need to keep it restricted to those types of incidents, it is permissible for a person to go outside to Masjid Aisha, meaning outside of the sanctuary of Mecca, and to come back in and make umrah on behalf of their deceased relative. That was the gist of the discussion that was held yesterday as it relates to making umrah on behalf of someone else, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. We're going to continue with the chapter that we started yesterday, which is من حقق التوحيد دخل الجنة بغير حساب ولا عذاب. The one who excels in tawheed. We talked a little bit about that yesterday. What does that mean? That someone excels in tawheed, that they've made tahqiq of a tawheed, which is important for us to understand, because the reward for that person is that they enter paradise without any reckoning. That is, they're not taken into account. There's no back and forth and questioning, and without any adab. That is, they go straight to paradise. Not as some of the Muslims who will be purified in hell before they get the opportunity to enter paradise. We talked yesterday about that, and we said that the Muslims are of three different categories as mentioned in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ثُمَّ أَوْرَثْنَا الْكِتَابَ الَّذِينَ اصْطَفَيْنَا مِنْ عِبَادِنَا فَمِنْهُمْ ظَالِمٌ لِنَفْسِهِ وَمِنْهُمْ مُقْتَصِدٌ وَمِنْهُمْ سَابِقٌ بِالْخَيْرَاتِ بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned that the categories of this ummah, that is the people who have accepted the Quran, and those whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen and given the Quran, that there are three categories. The first are ظَالِمٌ لِنَفْسِهِ, those who oppress themselves. Who are they? I'm asking. Who are they? Yes. Okay, so they are those who do one of two things. Either they leave off that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has obligated, or they do things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prohibited. Now, which one is worse, by the way? Which one? Which category of sins is worse? The category of leaving off an obligation, or the category of doing something that is prohibited? Which category is worse? Doing that which is prohibited. Like, no, you say leaving off the obligations? Okay. The correct answer is that the category of leaving off obligations is worse. And there's a lot of proof for that. And many of the scholars mention the story of Adam, alayhi salatu wassalam, and Shaytan. Adam did what? He did what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited. He ate from the tree that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited from eating from. And then he turned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in repentance, and his repentance was accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he did something that was prohibited. As for Shaytan, he left off what Allah azza wa jalla obligated. Allah told him to prostrate, and he did it because of arrogance. And a lot of times this is the case, that people leave off that which is obligated upon them out of arrogance, that they don't feel like they have to do this. And why should I have to do this or that, even though they know that it is their Creator subhanahu wa ta'ala who has obligated it upon them. Right. The second category of Muslims are the muqtasid, those who are traveling a middle course. They're balanced. And who are they? They are those who do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded. They fulfill their obligations. And they avoid the prohibitions, especially the kaba'ir, the major sins. So these people are from the people of Tawheed, and they are also to be considered from those who excel in their Tawheed, but they're not from the next level, which is as-sabiquna bil khayrat bi-idhnillah. And they are the ones who are the foremost. They excel, they strive in pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so not only do they fulfill their obligations and leave off the prohibitions, but they add on to that. They do more than just their obligations. They do things from the mustahabbat. And they avoid not only the prohibitions, but the things that lead to the prohibitions, and they leave off things that are makruh as well. So these are the people who have excelled in the Tawheed, singling out Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their worship. We also mentioned yesterday, and this is important to recap before we get to today's lesson, that there are three things that stand in the way of you excelling in Tawheed. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala referred to them as awa'iq. An a'ib is something that stands in the path. It's a hurdle. It hinders you from getting to where you want to go. So you, after Allah, all of us, want to be from the people who enter into paradise without being questioned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, without subjecting ourselves to that hisab. And we want to be from the people who enter paradise without being punished first. And so because of that, we need to know these three things so that we can avoid them at all costs. The first thing we said was that which totally contradicts Tawheed, which is what? The opposite. That's shirk. And we're going to talk, inshallah ta'ala. By the way, tomorrow and the day after, Wednesday and Thursday, there won't be any class. After today, class is going to resume on Friday, inshallah. And on Friday, we're going to discuss shirk in a lot of detail, much more than we have discussed in the past. But as we mentioned, shirk, which a lot of times is translated as polytheism or idolatry, does not just stop at the things that you see. Oh, somebody prostrated to an idol, or he's making tawaf around a grave. Shirk doesn't just stop there. Shirk includes those things that creep into your heart, that turn you away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that cause you to love something more than you love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or to fear something more than you fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to put your trust in other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some of these may reach the level of being major shirk, that is, will take you outside of the fold of Islam, and a lot of it is minor shirk, which means that it is a form of idolatry, but that it does not take you outside of the fold of Islam. So, a person wants to be from those who excel in Tawheed. The first thing is that he has to avoid shirk in his beliefs, in his statements, in his actions, at all costs, all forms. The second is that he avoids that which contradicts his compliance with the following of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. So it contradicts emulation, and we said that that is what? Innovation, bid'ah. So any form of innovation is going to take away from one's completion of Tawheed. Why? Because in order to be a true worshiper of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you have to worship him the way that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam legislated. If you make up your own way to worship Allah, then this is not considered to be Tawheed, because you haven't singled out the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam as the messenger and the one who has conveyed that message of Tawheed. Like, the last thing that has to be avoided, and this doesn't negate or totally negate one's Tawheed, but it does diminish one's Tawheed. And that is the category that contradicts your complete love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it shows that you love your desires. And that category is what? The category of sins. Sins in general. how do sins, the scholars mention this, how do sins indicate that you have a deficiency in your love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How is that? Because if you truly love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you put the love of what He loves over what you love, then you're not going to fall into whatever sin it is that you're committing. You're not going to put your desires over the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that doesn't mean that people won't commit sins. And a lot of people commit sins and don't even realize that they've done it until it's over. There's a difference between someone who knows that they are sinning and one who commits sins and unwittingly. They look back on it and they say, SubhanAllah, that wasn't something I should have said. Or that wasn't something I should have done. That's displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They seek His forgiveness. There's a difference between that kind of person and the person who has a premeditated sin. They planned it out. They know what they're going to do. That one is the one that takes a deficiency or shows some deficiency in one's love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We moved on. We covered the first ayah that the author brings to talk about the excelling in Tawheed. And that was the ayah where he says, Inna Ibrahima kana ummatan qanitan lillahi hanifa wa lam yakun min al-mushrikeen. Ibrahim was an ummah. And what do we say ummah meant? Yes, he was an imam at the front. He was a role model. He was an ummah. Qanitan lillah. That is, he was at the forefront of doing good. And he was devout in his worship of Allah. And he was Hanif. And what is Hanif? Who was someone who was Hanif? Yes, someone who turns to Allah and therefore does what? Turns his back on everything else. Turns his back on false idols. It's critical to note here that if a person truly turns to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then Allah and the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes his focus, and he's not worried about pleasing anyone or anything else besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a person who is truly Hanif. Hanifan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described Ibrahim. So what? He turned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The focus of his life was pleasing his Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he didn't look to other than Allah. He turned his back on everything else, and that is a requirement. If you turn to Allah, there's no way that you can turn to anything else because there's nothing like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَمْ يَكُ مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ, and he was not from amongst the mushrikeen. I'm repeating this from yesterday so that you can understand something important, and that is that Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam was from the imams, not just of mankind, but the imams. He was known as one of the leaders of the messengers and prophets. He was from the foremost of them. And they were the best people to excel in Tawheed. So if these were his qualities, then we need to strive also to fulfill those qualities so that we can excel in Tawheed. Like, let's move on, inshallah, to the hadith. And we'll pick up at the part where the Prophet ﷺ went into his home, where he went into the home. And the beginning of the hadith is what? The beginning of the hadith was between Husayn ibn Abdurrahman and Sa'id ibn Jubair, rahimahumullah. They were from the Tabi'een, and they were talking about what happened to Husayn ibn Abdurrahman when he was stung by the scorpion. And he was up at night and he saw that shooting star. And so he was explaining to Sa'id ibn Jubair that he was stung, and Sa'id ibn Jubair said, okay, what happened? What did you do? And he said, I performed ruqya on myself. And so then he narrated this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he said, I've been shown the nations, and amongst them, was a prophet who had 40 some odd followers, and from there was a prophet who only had 1 or 2 followers, and some who had none. And then he was shown the nation of Musa alayhi salam, and then he was shown his ummah. And amongst them are 70,000 who will not be punished, who will enter Jannah without being punished, and they will face no reckoning. And then the Prophet ﷺ got up and he went to his home. And so the companions did what? They started theorizing. Who are those 70,000? And by the way, and this is hope for the Ummah, there are other narrations, as Hafid ibn Hajar mentions in Fath al-Bari, there are other narrations that indicate that it doesn't stop at 70,000. And that with each of those 70,000 is 70,000. And as is well known in the Arabic language, the word 70 is used to indicate a lot. Sometimes the same way that we use the word 100 in English, right? So if you called someone a lot and they didn't answer the phone, right? And you saw them, you said, I called you 100 times, you didn't pick up, right? The Arabs use 70 in a similar fashion. They use it to mean a lot. And so there's some indication here, and because of the other narrations, that the number doesn't stop at 70,000. That the number is beyond that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. وَفَضْلُ اللَّهِ وَاسِعٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's bounties are endless in quantity. And so there's nothing wrong for us, to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from amongst those people who enter Jannah without any punishment and without any hisab. And this is a month of dua. We should be making that dua, when we're in sujood and all of the time. So the Prophet ﷺ went in his home, and the companions began amongst themselves to have the discussion. Who are these 70,000? Notice that they all recognized that they were people who had done something. Meaning that there has to be some type of action that a person puts forth. So some of them said maybe they're the ones who were the companions of the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam. Apparently, the early companions of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Or maybe those who were born in Islam, and so they never worshiped anything besides Allah. They never committed shirk. And so some of them said this and some of them said that until the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam came back out from his home. Now, what did the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam say? Who are they?
Bismillah walhamdulillah. Salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Allahumma ighfir lana wa li shaykhina wa li sabiin. The author goes on to say, and while they were exchanging their views like this, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam came out and was informed about the news. He said, there are those people who do not seek ruqya.
Okay, number one, there are those people who do not seek ruqya. La yastarqu. Okay? Number two.
Nor do they believe in bad omens.
Nor do they believe in omens in general, not just bad ones. I'll talk about that in a minute, inshallah. So they don't believe in omens. That in Arabic, the word for that is yatatayyarun, which we'll discuss in a minute, inshallah. Okay? Number three.
Nor do they get themselves branded or cauterized.
Nor do they get themselves
branded or cauterized.
Branded or cauterized. Okay? That's number three. They don't use cowrie. Well, and I'll talk about that, inshallah. Yeah. But number four.
But they put their trust only in Allah.
And they put their trust only in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They rely only upon Allah. Now.
Upon that, the companion...
So how many characteristics did the Prophet ﷺ mention? 4. These are the people who the Prophet ﷺ said they will enter paradise without any reckoning and without any punishment. And the hadith is collected by QARI and Muslim, by the way, so we don't have to look at its authenticity. The hadith is authentic, and this is the Prophet ﷺ telling us this. Now,
upon that, the companion Ukasha ibn Muhsin got up and said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, O Prophet of Allah, ask Allah to make me from them. He said, you are from them.
Okay. So here, a companion stood up. He was there. He heard this hadith. He was with the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam as the hadith was being mentioned. And so he he stood up. His name was Ukasha ibn Mihsan. And he stood up and he said, O Messenger of Allah, make dua that Allah make me from them. You hear that? He did not say, O Messenger of Allah, make me from them. Why? Because that would be what?
Sure.
That would be shirk. Because now he's asking the Prophet ﷺ directly to make him from amongst them. That's not the right of the Prophet ﷺ. That right is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And to divert any of Allah's rights to other than Allah is the textbook definition of shirk. Okay, so he didn't say, O Messenger of Allah, make me from them. He said, O Messenger of Allah, ask Allah to make me from them. Now,
The Prophet ﷺ said, you are from them. Then another man got up and said, O Messenger of Allah.
okay. So the Prophet ﷺ said, Anta minhum. You are from them. In the narration of Bukhari, it says, Allahumma ja'alhu minhum. Oh Allah, ja'alka minhum. Oh Allah, make him or make you from the, talking to Cash. Oh Allah, make him from them. And so many of the scholars have said that this statement, you are from them, is actually a dua from the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. It's actually dua from the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam for this Sahabi and Ukasha. Alright?
Then another man got up and said, O Messenger of Allah, ask Allah to make me one of them.
Okay. So now the next man stands up. He said, oh, this is great. Right? The Prophet ﷺ is going to make dua for all. So the next man stood up and he said, O Messenger of Allah, make me from amongst them. Ask Allah to make me from amongst them. And then what did the Prophet ﷺ say?
The Prophet ﷺ said, Ukasha has preceded you to it.
He said, Ukasha beat you to it. In other words, he's not going to make dua for each one after him. Because now what's going to happen? If he says, oh Allah, make him from amongst them, then the next person is going to stand up and it's not going to end. And the Prophet ﷺ was ra'ufun, rahimun bihadi al-ummah. He was the most compassionate and merciful with this ummah. And there's no doubt that the Prophet ﷺ made dua for all of his companions. And he made dua for this ummah, in fact. And so it wasn't that the Prophet ﷺ was turning him away, but that the Prophet ﷺ put an end to what would be a chain reaction that wouldn't have any end to it, wouldn't have any conclusion. So the Prophet ﷺ made dua for him. Now, I'm going to just address this issue and then we'll get back to what does it mean to seek ruqya, and what does it mean to cauterize, and what does it mean to believe in omens or use omens. And what does it mean to have tawakkul upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? We'll get back to that. But I just want to deal with this part of the hadith where Ukasha radiallahu ta'ala anhu asked the Prophet ﷺ to make dua for him. Is it okay? Is it okay for you to ask someone else to make dua for you? Is it okay to go and say, Fulan, make dua for me? Yes, it's permissible. And that is by ijma' of the early scholars of Islam, that it is permissible to ask someone else to make dua for you. But we need to understand something, because there's various narrations when it comes to this. The proof for this is the fact that Ukasha himself, he asked the Prophet ﷺ to make dua for him. And the Prophet ﷺ didn't look at that as being something that was bad. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ taught Umar radiallahu ta'ala, if you go to such and such a place and you see, what was his name? Uwais al-Qarni, ask him to make dua for you. And he wasn't even from amongst the Sahaba. Uwais al-Qarni was not from amongst the Sahaba. And there are countless narrations from the Salaf, especially from most of the Sahaba, where you actually see that they asked each other to make dua for one another. On Hajj, on Umrah, and otherwise. But there are also narrations where companions were asked to make dua for someone and they refused to. So for example, there's a narration where a man came to Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and he said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, oh leader of the believers, make dua for me. He said, La ghafar Allahu lak. May Allah not forgive you. Atarani nabiyyan, do you see me to be a prophet? In other words, the ones who you want to ask to make dua on your behalf are those who are sinless in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now you don't just go up to anybody asking them to make dua for you. And so Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu used that as a teaching moment. Don't just go to anybody asking them to make dua for you. And the reason behind that, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, but this has been mentioned by some of the scholars, and I think it's important for us to understand, because, and this is something that early scholars of Islam did talk about and they disliked. You don't want this to become a habit amongst people. Right now, some people ask other people to make dua for them as if it's better than you making dua for yourself, and it's not. It's not. In other words, I'm going to rely on the fact that I ask my shaykh or I ask this person or that person to make dua for me, and then I don't make dua for myself. And the Prophet ﷺ said that dua huwa al-ibadah. That dua is the ibadah. It is the worship. It is the essence of worship. And so a person should be making dua for himself, and if you ask someone else to make dua for you, there should be something appropriate about them. In other words, they're going to a place like Mecca, they're going to make Umrah, and they're going to be raising their hands on Safa and Marwa, or they're going to Hajj, they're going to be raising their hands to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on Arafah and other scenarios like this, where it's more likely that their dua is going to be accepted. And so there's a reason other than your heart being attached to a person. And that's what you want to avoid. Make dua for me. Who is this person to make dua on your behalf that you can't do for yourself? Except in the case, and this is what Shaykh Islam rahimahullah ta'ala mentioned, and this was his preferred opinion, and the opinion of Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah as well, is that if you ask someone to make dua for you to benefit them, then this is praiseworthy. In other words, I'm asking you to make dua for me because I want you to be busy making dua. You get blessings for that. Instead of me just telling you, hey, go pray 2 rakats. Nobody's going to listen to you. Right? But if you say to them, make dua for me, then that person is making dua for you. They're getting rewards for the dua, and you're getting rewards because you were the one that was the cause of them doing that act of ibadah. And so if this is your intention behind asking someone to make dua for you, then this is a great intention indeed, and inshallah ta'ala you'll be rewarded and that person will be rewarded. In general, just to sum up, it is permissible to ask someone to make dua for you, but you shouldn't do it frequently. That should not be your habit, that you just go around asking people to make dua for you. Let's get back to our hadith. The Prophet ﷺ, and we should know these 4 qualities so that we can embody them and be from amongst the people bi-idhnillahi ta'ala who excel in tawheed and who enter paradise without any punishment and any reckoning. The first of them, the Prophet ﷺ said, La yastarqu. They do not seek for others to make ruqyah for them. They don't go around looking for, who's the sheikh in this town? Who performs ruqyah in this town? Who's the one who's known for ruqyah in this area? And they go around looking for the sheikh or the imam of the masjid or someone like this so that they can cure them. What is ruqyah? Somebody explain to me. What's that mean? What is ruqyah? Anybody? Yeah, go ahead. Dua? Okay,
Cure.
so it's using the Quran as a cure, but not just the Quran. It can be from dua that have been narrated on the Prophet ﷺ, or even other dua that are permissible. And that a person says them, and if the person is performing ruqya for himself, right, then he may recite into his hands as the Prophet ﷺ did when he would recite the Mu'awwidhatayn, Qul Huwallahu Ahad. Or you can just simply recite the Quran, or you can recite the Quran and perhaps if it is because of a pain that you are dealing with, that you put your hand over the area where the pain is. This is ruqya. If someone else is doing it, a lot of times it may just be recitation of the Quran. Sometimes they may also, assuming that they're of the same gender, they may put their hand on the person where that person is experiencing some pain and recite. So this is ruqya. But the Prophet ﷺ explained in the last thing that he said, وَعَلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. This is the quality of the people who excel in Tawheed. It is summed up in Tawakkul, which inshallah will become clear as we go on. That is, if you want to be a real wahid, you want to really be from the people of Tawheed, you have to excel in Tawakkul. Because that is the quality that is comprehensive of all of everything else. It shows that you have true hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It shows that you have belief in His decree subhanahu wa ta'ala. It shows that you have husnul dhan billah. That you have good thoughts about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That you fear His tawakkul has all of that combined. Alright? So, why is it that asking someone else to perform ruqya for you, how is that an indication of a lack of tawakkul? Doesn't mean you don't have any trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It doesn't mean you don't have any reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But how does it show that there's a lack of tawakkul? Let me ask you this. And then this will become a bit clearer, inshallah. Did the Prophet ﷺ say that in order to be from amongst those people, that you can't go to the doctor? They had doctors at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. He said you can't go, you can't seek a cure or a remedy for whatever disease you're facing. No. In fact, some Bedouins came to the Prophet ﷺ and they asked him, should we not, seek remedy? In Sunan Abi Dawud, the Prophet ﷺ said, Naam ya ibadallah, tadawa. Yes, service of Allah, seek a cure, because there is no disease except that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent for it a cure. And He sent for it a remedy, except for one, and that is death. There is no cure for that. So, looking for a cure or even going to the doctor, there's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't negate one's tawakkul. Why would we say that? Why would we say that seeking someone to perform ruqya for you does show a deficiency in tawakkul? The reason is this, and I want you to pay attention, is that the one who is performing ruqya is usually dealing with an element of the unseen. When do people tend to perform ruqya? After they've sought other means of what? Of treatment. They've sought other treatment. The doctors couldn't figure it out. They've done all types of tests. And then a person goes to the Raqi, the one who's going to perform ruqya. Because it's something unseen. Maybe it is a jinn that is causing the pain. Maybe there's this, maybe there's that. And so, what happens is, the heart in general of the person who is seeking the ruqya has a degree of attachment to the one who is performing the ruqya. Which is different than the doctor. When you go to the doctor, there's not that kind of attachment to the doctor. But if there is, it takes the same ruling as ruqya. Al-hukm yaduru ma'a illatihi. And that's the rule in Islam. That the ruling, that is the Islamic ruling of something, is connected and dependent upon the cause, subhanAllah, the illah, which there's a perfect translation for that I can't think of right now. But in other words, you got a translation for that? The underlying reason behind the rule. So here, the reason why it is disliked. The reason why it is disliked that we don't seek ruqya is because, in general, the heart of the one who is seeking the ruqya is going to be attached to the one who is performing the ruqya. And this heart is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. It is to know Him subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, and it should be dedicated to the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And the minute that a part of it gets attached to something else, then it takes away from a person's tawheed. Because what did we say tawheed was? What does tawheed mean linguistically? To single something out. And if your heart is almost totally attached to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and a little attached to something else, then it takes away from that tawheed. You understand? So that is why seeking ruqya is something that would take one away from getting this reward that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned in this hadith. Now, in general, seeking ruqya is permissible. It is permissible. Ibn Abdullah, rahimahullah ta'ala, one of the great Maliki scholars, died in 463, he said that there's ittifaq or agreement amongst the scholars that it is permissible to seek ruqya. But permissibility does not always indicate that there's not a degree of karaha, or that it is disliked. Because something can be permissible, but at the same time, disliked. Right? Which I don't want to confuse everybody, but inshallah, just to understand that it is not haram. We'll put it like that. Agreement amongst the scholars that it is not haram to ask someone to perform ruqya on your behalf. Now, let's take it a step further. Is it permissible for you to do ruqya for yourself? Yes, and this is ibadah. And the Prophet ﷺ did ruqya for himself. And Jibril did ruqya for the Prophet ﷺ. And Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha did ruqya for the Prophet ﷺ. If we say it's something that we should avoid, to go out and seek for someone to perform ruqya on our behalf, how do we understand the fact that Aisha did ruqya on the Prophet ﷺ? I want you to get your brains moving. How can we understand that? It is authentic. Aisha, radiallahu ta'ala, Sahih QARI, performed ruqya on the Prophet ﷺ. The answer is, he didn't ask her to. She just did it. And so if someone wants to perform ruqya, for example, there are many times where you may go to the hospital, you're visiting a Muslim, and you see that they're experiencing some pain, or that they're ill. They don't have to ask you. You just go. You can put your hand on them, and you can sit next to them, and you can recite ayatul kursi or recite Fatiha. Over and over. Fatiha is the cure. Fatiha is the best thing that you can recite. And you have to recite it, knowing, with full conviction that it is a cure, and knowing its meanings, and drawing close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like, can you perform ruqya on a non-Muslim? Is that permissible? You may have non-Muslim relatives. You go visit them and they're sick. Can you do ruqya for them? Yes or no? Absolutely. And one of the ways that we know that Fatiha is a cure, because of the hadith of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri in Sahih al-Bukhari, when they were in a particular area, and Allahu A'lam, it was the leader of the tribe, but he had been stung by a scorpion. And the tribe itself, they were looking for someone who could treat him. And Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, the radiallahu ta'ala anhu, said that we can treat him for compensation. And he read over him Surah Al-Fatiha. And the man was cured. He wasn't Muslim. And he was cured. They went back to the Prophet ﷺ because now they weren't sure. Can we actually accept this compensation or not? And this is when the Prophet ﷺ said, the thing that you have the most right to take a reward for is from the Book of Allah. So you can take that compensation. And there's a lot of discussion about this, not to go too deep into it. The point is here that the first quality is that they don't seek ruqya. So ya Abdullah, from now on, because people have become, in this day and age, people are meftuneen, and I don't even know how to say that in English. They are totally, they've taken it to the next level, as we can say, when it comes to the ruqya. To the point that there are houses here that are known for ruqya. A person may stop you on the street. Do you know what Shaykh Fulan's house is? You know what they're going for. This person thinks he's crazy or whatever, and now he wants somebody to read over it. And it doesn't mean that this is not an important aspect of our deen, but that we have people that specialize in ruqya now. Their whole life, their income is based on ruqya. And they have a whole practice establishments. And people come to them from different cities and different places because he's the shaykh. Because now what happens is he becomes the one who cures, not the Quran. You see what happens? You see how it goes? It's a tricky, it's a slippery slope. The ruqya. It's a slippery slope when you get involved in it, because now, again, the heart becomes attached to the raqi, and it's not attached to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if it goes too far, it will take somebody not just deficiency in tawheed, but outside of the tawheed. And so it's important that we look, if you have a family member that's suffering from something, and this is the thing, this is the other thing, and I think we need a balance in this particular area, is that a lot of us, when it comes to mental illnesses, because of the stigma in many of our communities related to mental illnesses, we automatically think jinn. No, mental illness is real, just like physical illness. The brain has illnesses, and sometimes there's a chemical imbalance, and there's medication that is needed to help them. And that doesn't mean ruqya won't help, but it does mean that it is treatable in other forms. And then we have some people who deny the existence of jinn. They deny the existence of, or the benefit of ruqya. And everything, that a person is dealing with is just mental health issues. They just need to go see, they need to go talk it out, sit on somebody's couch. And then let the, psychiatrist determine what type of medicines they're supposed to take. And so a Muslim takes a middle course and recognizes that just as we have physical ailments, there are mental ailments. And that mental health issues are real and they need to be dealt with, but we also shouldn't deny the fact that ruqya is important and that it will cure things that cannot be cured by drugs. Now, the second thing that the Prophet ﷺ says is, وَلَا يَكْتَوُونَ. I'll deal with that, then I'll deal with those. وَلَا يَكْتَوُونَ. And that means that they don't seek to be cauterized. And what we mentioned yesterday, or branded, we talked about what is cauterization. And to be honest with you, it's broader than just treating open wounds with fire or even now electricity. Anything that is hot, super hot, to bring a wound back together, that's called cauterizing. But they use it for other things, like to burn off warts. So, if anyone has ever had a wart on the bottom of their foot, for example, chances are if you go to the doctor, they're going to cauterize it. Some people who suffer from nosebleeds, frequent nosebleeds, they get cauterized. And so, the issue here is, okay, why is this something that, or how does this relate to a tawakkul? And many of you'll find that many, if you go back and you read, for those of you who can read explanations of Kitab Tawheed, you'll find that a lot of the ones who have explained Kitab al-Tawheed don't actually talk about the relationship between counterizing and tawakkul. What they do talk about, and this is an important side point, is that counterizing involves fire or something very hot. And it is disliked that we punish ourselves in this way with the punishment that is used in the hereafter. So they talk about that relationship. And one stays away, and that is why it is not permissible to burn the enemy. Right? Talk about in battle too. If in fact there is a battle between Muslims and their enemies, the ones who are killed are to be respected. The deceased, the corpse is to be respected, it's not to be burned. Because that punishment is solely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the air. And there are, again, this is a long discussion that goes beyond the scope of what we're going to talk about today. So, as a side note, counterizing was used in this part of the world up until very recently. It's not very common right now, but up until very recently it was used. And they talk about how it has healing powers. There's a funny story about it that's actually quite interesting. There was a man who had severe lower back pain. This is actually narrated by a doctor. He said there was a man who had severe back pain. And the doctors tried everything. SubhanAllah, the man could not walk. The pain had become so unbearable that he was not able to walk. All right? Went to the doctors, he saw all types of treatments. He still was not able to walk. So, as the Arabs say, after the cake, right? The last form of, the last form of treatment is cauterizing. So, and it's done different ways. So they put the 2 hot coals, and they put it in the area where the man was feeling the pain in his lower back. And mashallah, from the pain that he was feeling, he got up and he ran, not just walked. He got up and he ran. And they said, mashallah, he was cured. He was cured. He was cured by the cauterizing. As you can see, that wasn't actually a cure. It's just that the pain was so severe that he was able to manage the pain that was in his lower back, because it really is that bad. It really is that bad, that kind of fire. Or the heat that is associated. So, what is it that makes there be, some type of deficiency in tawakkul? The issue is this: cauterizing is not just one type, and that's the thing. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ is talking about in this hadith, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Ibn Qutaybah, one of the early scholars of Islam, rahimahullah ta'ala, mentioned that it was the practice of the Arabs. So you can find this in the history books as well. They actually took cauterizing from the Persians. And the Persians, as we know, early Persians did what? They worshipped fire. It wasn't just that they used it. So the fire for them was revered. They venerated this treatment with fire. It wasn't just seen as a regular medical treatment. It was a religious practice to it as well. Okay? So they worshipped fire. Now the Arabs didn't necessarily, in terms of historically, they didn't necessarily worship fire, but they looked at it as having this cauterizing, as not just having a cure as an after effect. They looked at it as being a preventative cure as well, and therapeutic. So the Prophet ﷺ, so if, again, what can cauterizing do before something actually happens? Nothing. It means that a person has some kind of subtle belief, right, in the process, and that is what negates one's tawakkul. It's not something that's after the fact. If the only thing that can be done to heal an open wound, for example, is to burn it, then there's no harm in doing that, and that doesn't take one outside of this hadith or the reward that's mentioned in this hadith. But to do so prior to there being any signs of of disease, you're doing it as a preventative measure, then this is what the Prophet ﷺ is referring to here, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. A number of the scholars of hadith as well have said that here there's a difference between al-kay and al-iktiwa, meaning that to perform the cauterizing is different from al-iktiwa, which means you ask somebody else to do it for you, or you go out seeking someone to do it for you. And so the second is what is prohibited, not the first. Because there is a degree of humiliating oneself every time you ask someone to do something for you. And that should be avoided. The last thing that the Prophet ﷺ mentions in terms of the things that they do not do is وَلَا يَتَطَيَّرُونَ. They do not use omens, and they do not believe in omens. At Tatayyur, there's a whole chapter that we're going to deal with in Kitab Tawheed that deals with omens. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail right now, but at Tatayyur, it sounds like the word ta'ir, right? Or ta'ir. So ta'ir is what? It's a bird. And that's because a lot of times the Arabs prior to Islam would look at birds as omens. If the bird goes left, that's a bad sign. If he goes right, it's a good sign. Or if he's flying this way, it's a good sign. It's a bad. So omens are any type of phenomena that either propels you to do something or prevents you from doing something. It has no basis. So any type of thing that would make you feel like you have some knowledge of a future event because of it. So now you wanted to go travel, but as you were about to travel, you saw a particular bird and it went this direction, and you said, no, I'm not going to travel now, because if I travel, I'm going to have an accident. You believe now that this bird is telling you something about the future. And it's not just restricted to birds. As we'll cover, omens are many, many different types. Some are related to animals, others are related to signs in general. And people have all types of weird beliefs. You know, if they book a flight, and then they put them in the 13th row. Oh, no, I'm not traveling. It's a bad sign. Right? Or any of these types of things. So we'll talk about this bi'idhnillahi ta'ala in the near future when we get to that particular chapter. The point is here, and I think it's pretty obvious, that this shows a true lack of tawakkul upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for someone to have this belief in these omens. As for a ruqya, and as for cauterizing, to seek that is something that is not haram. It's not haram. Unless we're talking about the type of cauterizing that is prior to any type of disease or illness or pain or something that someone may be facing. Then the Prophet ﷺ summarized all of those three qualities by saying, وَعَلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. And upon Allah they put their trust. Meaning, they rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And if they rely upon Allah alone, then they're not going to put their trust in the rocky, they're not going to put their trust in any form of medical treatment or anything like that. They're going to put their trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And there's something that's very common today, and I think it's important to raise awareness about it, because we may not recognize that it is a form of a lack of tawakkul upon Allah, a lack of reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's what many of us are taught because of the material world that we live in today. Many of us are taught to put our trust in ourselves. You can do it. Yes, we can. If we just strive, if we put forth the effort, then we are going to be successful. And we're going to achieve our objectives. And if you haven't achieved your objective, if you fail because you didn't achieve your objective, it's because you didn't work hard enough. You didn't put your best foot forward. You didn't do this or you did that, and that is why you are the greatest thing in the world. Because you did it. And this is, unfortunately, this is the whole self-help industry is based on this. It's based on you. The world becomes you-centered. And honestly, it's a shame that some Muslims fall for this and totally disregard that trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, that doesn't mean that as Muslims we don't strive. The Prophet ﷺ told us that the strong Muslim is better than the weak Muslim, that he is more beloved to Allah. Ihris ala ma yanfa'uk, that the Prophet ﷺ said. Not just do what benefits you, ihris, strive, go for it, be keen in doing those things. You understand? Ihris ala ma yanfa'uk. The Prophet ﷺ said, strive to do those things that are going to benefit you. Not just do them, but strive to do them. Work hard to do them. So as Muslims, in any event, we already have that teaching from our Prophet ﷺ. We don't need some type of self-help guru. ﷺ say immediately after the Ihris ala ma yanfa'uk, strive to do that which benefits you. What did he say after that? Wasta'in billah, and seek Allah's aid. Because you have to know that it is not going to be by your strength solely that you achieve these accomplishments. It's not simply because you wanted it to happen that it's going to happen. But you have to strive for that. Because if you don't strive, then most likely it's not going to happen. You ever see the student who says, he doesn't study, he's not studying for his exam. And you say, you have to study so you can pass. He says, whatever Allah wills is going to happen. I'm good. As if the wahi, he's going to get revelation. It's going to come down to his brain at the time of the test. He doesn't have to study. No. The Prophet ﷺ did not instruct us like that. But at the same time, we do believe that if we put forth the effort that we can put forth, and then the thing still doesn't happen. You wanted to marry a certain person. You put forth the effort to make it happen. You had a good job, and it didn't happen. Okay, cut to the lot. You have to know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took that away from you for a great reason. You wanted a particular job. You did your best to get that job. You did all of the studies that you needed to get, certificates, and it didn't happen. Okay. Because what is the result of that? If you don't, is depression. And this is, unfortunately, this is all too common in the Muslim community because there's a lack of tawakkul upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That reliance upon Allah is what the Prophet ﷺ is showing us in this hadith, is the comprehensive quality that the believer has that will allow him to excel in tawheed and singing out Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his worship and in all that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deserves. And so we know through this trust upon Allah, through that reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we'll get what we are supposed to get if we put forth the effort. But our reliance has to be upon Him. It cannot be upon the creation. Now, this also doesn't mean that we have to be balanced in our understanding of these concepts. It also doesn't mean that you can't tell someone, for example, hey, I'm trusting you on this one, or I'm depending on you on this one. But what happens with the creation is that even if someone loves you, even if that person is dependable, even if that person, for example, let's just say you had to go out of town. You need somebody to pick up your children from school, right? And so you told this person, listen, I want you to pick up my child, and they agreed and everything. Is it still not possible that they might forget? You might forget. Is it possible that on the way to go pick up your children, that there was a car accident, that their car broke down, that something happened, and therefore they weren't able to fulfill that trust that you had with them? Yes, that's very possible. But there's nothing that can stop Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants something, all he has to do is say be, and it is. And Allah Azza wa Jalla, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't forget anything. And so your complete trust has to be upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It can't be with the creation. And therefore your heart always has to be attached to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that is what tawakkul means. It is that you have resigned your affair to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that your heart is attached to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not to any of the creation. With you putting forth the effort to make whatever it is that you want done, get done. This is that quality. The Prophet ﷺ said, وَعَلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ, and they put their trust and reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And with this, if a person avoids those things that the Prophet ﷺ talked about, and he has full tawakkul upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then he will be from those who haqqaqa tawheed, meaning that he excelled in tawheed and fulfilled its requirements, and he will enter Jannah without any punishment and without any reckoning. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from amongst the people who enter paradise without reckoning and without being punished. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad.
There's a couple of questions.
The
first one is it permissible to make dua in salah in another language other than Arabic?
Now, the Prophet ﷺ instructed us with many different formulas for dua in prayer. That is, while you're actually making salah. So some of those dua, some of those adhkar, like if this is what the questioner is asking about specific adhkar, like for example, Allahu Akbar. And you cannot say at the beginning of your salah, Allah is the greatest. No. You have to say Allahu Akbar. But if the questioner, and like Subhana Rabbi al-Azim, but if the questioner is Subhana Rabbi al-Azim, if the questioner is talking about the dua that is made in sujood, meaning that which is beyond what is the obligation of your prayer. So the Prophet ﷺ told us that the closest that a servant is to his Lord is when he is in sujood, when he is prostrate. And so that this is one of the places where you should increase in making dua. If that is what the questioner is referring to, then there's no doubt that you can make dua in any language you like. If you do not have the ability to make that dua in Arabic. And so the base rule is that you would say it in Arabic, that you make dua in Arabic, because you want to make the dua that the Prophet ﷺ made the way that he made them. But if not, then you can make them in another language. And this is the fatwa of our Shaykh Muhammad bin Salih al-Uthaymeen, rahimahullah ta'ala.
Does that include the witr prayer?
Is that it?
Include the witr prayer.
As it relates to Qunut al-Witr, the overwhelming majority of the scholars, in fact, I haven't seen any scholar that said it's permissible to make it in other than the Arabic language. And that's because it's audible. Whereas your dua in sujood is not. For the witr, for the qunut and witr, if the person is the imam and he's making the dua out loud, I haven't come across any of the scholars that have said that it is permissible. In fact, some of the scholars say that if a person makes dua of qunut other than witr, then it renders the salah batila. Makes the entire salah invalid. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Perhaps there are some other opinions about that matter, but I'm not aware.
The next question, the rulings pertaining to a woman that's breastfeeding.
Of what?
Fasting. A woman that's breastfeeding.
Yeah, okay. Women that are breastfeeding.
And fasting at the same time. What are the rulings pertaining to that?
What is the rule? For women who are fasting, for women who are breastfeeding, and those who are pregnant as well, the correct opinion of the scholars is that they have to make up their fast if they don't fast. They have the license to break their fast if they fear for themselves, or they fear for their child or the fetus. They have the license. They have every right to break the fast. And they are considered to be similar in terms of ruling to the sick. And Allah Azza wa Jalla said, فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرَ. For those who are sick or traveling, that they make up the fast at another time, and other days. Like, so what do they have to do? If they break their fast, then they have to make up the fast at another time, after Ramadan. 2 points I want to make here is that a lot of women who breastfeed and a lot of women who are pregnant in the month of Ramadan still fast. And that's fine too, as long as they are not going to harm themselves or harm their child. And the way that many of them fast, in fact, inshallah ta'ala, is not harmful. So what they do, instead of fasting every day of Ramadan, they'll fast a day and they won't fast for 2 days. And then they fast another day, and then they won't fast for 3 days. And they fast 2 days, and then they don't fast for 4. Whatever works for them, because the base rule is that Ramadan, it is obligated to fast except for those who have a clear ruling not to fast. And that the rule for those who cannot fast, or who haven't fasted during the month of Ramadan, is that they make it up. Unless there's an indication that they feed instead of making it up. All right, so we're going to stick with the rules. The rule is that if she doesn't fast, she has to make it up, and that she makes it up outside of the month of Ramadan. So some women, for example, who are breastfeeding, make it out of Ramadan. They fasted, for example, 10 days, 9 days. They have 11 months to make up the 20 days that they missed. And in general, in the winter months, that becomes easy for them. Like, somebody might say, well, what about the narrations on Ibn Umar and Ibn Abbas, radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, where it says that they don't make up the fast, or at least that's the way some people narrate, where they say that they have to feed, where it says that the breastfeeding women and the pregnant who have not fasted, then they have to feed. And the answer to that is twofold. Number one, it's very interesting that if this was really the case, that if these narrations were authentic, it's very interesting that none of the scholars after them took their opinion. Not from the Hanafis, not from the Malikis, not from the Shafi'is, and not from the Hanbalis, and especially not the Malikis, because they were known to follow the madhab of Ibn Umar, radiallahu ta'ala. So if this was really the case, that there were these narrations where Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala said that they don't have to fast, they don't have to make up their fast, that they only have to feed. If that was the case, then most likely the Maliki scholars would have followed that opinion, but they didn't. And that's because, and as a closer look at those narrations, it appears to be that the narrations that mention that they don't make up their fast are not authentic. They are not authentic narrations on Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And what is authentic is that he said they have to feed, which means that not only do they make up the fast, but they also feed, and that's a longer discussion. The correct opinion, inshallah ta'ala, is that for women who are breastfeeding or who are pregnant, that they look at their situation. If they can fast, then they fast. If they fear for themselves or for their child, then they do not fast. And then they make up those days at a later time in the year, after Ramadan. Allahu Akbar. Not.
So what happens if a woman took the opinion of feeding as opposed to making up the days, and now, years later or 2 years later, she realized that she should have made those days?
Afallahu amma salaf. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us for what has preceded. So the question is, what about a woman who may have heard that opinion? Because it was the fatwa of Shaykh Albani, Allah yarhamu, and some of his students, and it became prevalent because it was translated into the English language. What if a woman took that opinion, if that was the extent of her knowledge and that was the fatwa that she was given, then she doesn't have any harm associated with what has preceded. And as long as she fed people and she followed that particular fatwa at that time, and there's no harm in that, inshallah ta'ala. However, moving forward, once she understands differently, then she acts according to what her knowledge is at that time. Like the man who came into the masjid, and he gave salams to the Prophet. He prayed 2 rak'ats, and he went and gave salams to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam returned the salams, and he said, "Irji' fa salli, fa innaka lam tusalli." Go back and pray because you didn't pray. The man just prayed 2 rak'ats. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "No, go back and pray because you didn't pray." So the man went back, he prayed 2 rak'ats. Went back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet told him, "Go back and pray because you didn't pray." Happened 3 times. He said, "Wallahi, O Messenger of Allah, I don't know how to pray other than this way. It's the only thing I know. It's the only thing I know how to do." So then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught him how to pray properly. The other narrations clarify that the man had no itma'nina in his salah, and he had no tranquility in his prayer, moving up and down, not taking his time with the position. Okay. Did the Prophet ﷺ, in any of the narrations of this hadith, or is there any indication whatsoever that the Prophet ﷺ said, "How long have you been a Muslim?" 1 year. Okay, go back and make up a year's worth of salah. This was what the man knew at that particular time. He implemented what he knew at the time. And he didn't go back and make up, a year's worth of salah or 6 months worth of salah or anything like that. From that point on, he was held accountable for the knowledge that he had. And this is a similar situation in Allah Ta'ala.
Shaykh, another question with regards to when somebody buys a new house, getting together and reading Quran, having ceremonies to read the Quran, blessings.
The coming together to read the Quran is something that is permissible in Islam under different circumstances. So, for example, people may come together to read to a particular shaykh. The shaykh reads to them and they read back to the shaykh, for example, to improve their recitation of Quran or to listen to him recite. And that's permissible. And we know that, and the scholars who talk about the permissibility of that use as a proof the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ when he went to Ibn Mas'ud and Ubay ibn Ka'b. And he asked each one of them to recite the Quran to him. And they said, "Should we recite the Quran to you? You are the one who would reveal to." He said, "In your khidmah, that's my own lady. I like to hear the Quran from other than me." So the fact that people will come together and read to a shaykh, whether that is so, or that the shaykh reads to them so that they can, improve their recitation, there's no doubt about the permissibility of that. You have another type of reading which is known as qira'at bil-idal. Is what is referred to amongst in academic terms. And that is when people get together and each one of them reads a portion of Quran. So this one reads a juz, maybe 5 or 6 of them get together. This one reads a juz, and then the next one reads a juz, and so on. And some of the scholars disliked that because it wasn't something that was practiced normally amongst the early generations of Islam. And other scholars said that there's no harm in doing so, whether it's reading a page and then that one reads the next page and then that one reads a page. And some contemporary scholars like Shaykh Tahir said that there's no harm in doing this because the most that's happening here is that they're repelling, not boredom is the wrong term, but basically how a person, if he only recites for himself, there may come a time where he gets a little tired. And so now he's rejuvenated by listening to someone else. And that seems to be okay for that. As it relates to what the questioner says, which is like a housewarming. Somebody gets a new house, or maybe they don't buy a new house, but they move into a new house, and so they get people to come together and they read the Quran in the house together. This practice, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, should be avoided. And that's because number one is if it becomes something that is a belief that it's sunnah, then that's problematic. And so a lot of people who do this believe that this is something we should do as Muslims. Not just something that is permissible, but something that's sunnah, which is a problem. That's number one. The second thing is that had this been something good to do upon moving into a new place, and in other words, we're going to repeat this action. It's not something, it's different than we're going to come together at this particular time, not a specific time during the year, not on a specific day, but we're going to come together and read the Quran. That's different from people who come together to read the Quran on an occasion, a specific occasion every single time. So this person moved into a new place, this person moves into a new apartment, this person bought a new house, this one had a house. No, every time that happens, we get together, we read the Quran. So we're specifying a specific time to it. This is, Allah Ta'ala Adam, what is referred to in academic terms as al-bid'ah al-idafiyya, which is like, again, the translation of these terms. It's an innovation that has a proof for the action itself, but not a proof for the way that it's being done. Not a proof for the way or the time, the manner that it's being performed. And Imam Shaykh Tahir rahimahullah ta'ala talked about this specifically as it related to reciting the Quran, and he considered it to be a bid'ah. And so it should be, this practice should be avoided. However, a person who moves into a new home, he should be one who is keen on reciting the Quran in his own home, not just when he first moves in. That's another thing. What is it about when you first move in, and then we're going to recite the Quran, and that is what is going to be the repellent for the ayn or whatever else they think that it is repellent, or the shaitan or whatever. In other words, we built this fortress around the house because we recited this one time. No, the Quran should be recited frequently in any home that you live in. And this should be the, a catalyst for the Muslim to push himself to recite the Quran more and not rely on the recitation of some other people. Wallahu a'lam. Anything else? Nah. Yeah. Let's just put it. I just answered that question. Just answer it. I'll tell you after the class, inshallah. I'll tell you after class, inshallah. I already answered the questions. Yeah. Anything else? Like, سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.